Getting your string height right, your action right, and set up well, whether you play pizzicato or arco or both, is just such an important topic. And I forgot that I haven't really covered that here on the channel. A person taking my course on discoverable bass reached out and asked, what is the optimal string height, the right string height? And that is a great question. So if you're interested in that topic, you're in the right place. The answer to the question, what is the best string height, will vary a bit depending on the style that you play. But as I learned from my friend and colleague Joey Nager, who does great work in Houston, Texas, a good setup kind of is a good setup.
I do a lot of what I'm calling an arco type setup for jazz players, and they seem pretty happy with it. So I don't know that it needs to be that different.
So I can tell you what my string height is, and how American of me, I have an inches only tape measure, but I will give you the metric equivalent, of course. And I'm going to measure right at the octave harmonic. I'm going to start on the G string, and I come up with 1/8 of an inch for the G. I come up with just about like between 1/8 and 1/4 for the D. I come up with a 1/4 almost on the dot for the A, and I come up with also a 1/4 for the E. That maybe there's like a little micro, like 1/2 millimeter difference between the A and the E, and I do wish I had a millimeters tape measure, but oh well. Now, what you'll notice is as you go toward the nut, that distance is going to change. So I am now, if I go to like the first position, like my first finger first position, that is like half the height of what it was at the octave harmonics. And also, if you go to the very end of the fingerboard, you're going to notice that that distance is a bit less too. That is something I'm way out of my element describing, but it's called fingerboard scoop, and I'll let Joey get into that.
Scoop refers to that lengthwise curvature. Another name for it is relief or camber. Those are other words you might hear to describe it. And you put that in so that the strings have room to vibrate. And if you want lower action, generally speaking, you want a little bit more scoop. If you're okay with higher action, you don't need as much scoop. I don't think the relationship between the curvatures at the bridge and the nut end are quite as important on a jazz setup. And the reason why I say that is when you're bowing the string, that string is moving in an elliptical path that's related to the direction of the bow. When you pitch the string, though, it doesn't have the bow to regulate which direction. So it's going in a more circular path. I think that relationship between the angle of the fingerboard and the direction of playing isn't as important. What is important, though, is the amount of scoop and the quality of the scoop. I find for pitch playing, that has a much bigger effect than it does for arco playing. Particularly a player who wants a nice growly sound. The amount of scoop that you have in the fingerboard is very important, and it's also very important that scoop be executed very well so that it's as smooth and as continuous a surface as possible. And that's what's going to give you a nice amount of growl on the notes.
Now, practically speaking, what are we looking for with string height? We're looking for something that is comfortable under the left hand, but doesn't buzz under normal circumstances. Let's say when you're playing pizzicato or arco. As an orchestral player, primarily when I'm playing for money, I am looking for a setup that doesn't what we call bottom out. So if I'm playing and the string hits the fingerboard when I lay in, that's not optimal. And of course, we can raise the strings enough so that that's not going to happen, but that's going to cause lots of discomfort in the left hand and all sorts of bad habits. When I go visit a school with bassists from the bass instruments from like the 70s or 80s, generally I'm going to find that those strings are too high. When you get a bass from a local shop, it's probably going to be much better set up, although I do find sometimes people come in with their strings too low. And yeah, if you're playing like pianissimo like this or something, maybe you won't get much buzzing, but you really need to make sure that you can displace the strings, and also by putting some vertical energy into it that you're not going to bottom out. Now, you may also be getting buzzes up here that could be for many reasons. One is that you just need to get the bass worked on and the fingerboard dressed. Before you do that, if you do have an adjustable bridge, yay, good for you. That has become pretty much standard on just about every bass. Raise and lower and try to find a place where it's not going to buzz for you and where you can comfortably put the strings down. If you are not able to make that happen, I have several resources online for where you can find a shop that specializes in double basses. I'll link that up in the description. But you're just looking for a fingerboard setup that's going to work well. Now, if you do get buzzes like this, that's what we call technical error, and that means that you just don't have your fingers depressing the string cleanly and clearly enough. I don't want to say pressing into the fingerboard enough, but you just have to make sure there's a nice good close over here. Also, even with the best setup in the world, if I go bananas, yeah, I can make my bass buzz. Like even on the G string here, although this is set up great for arco playing, forte playing, if I go and I really lay into it like grossly, I might get a little bit of buzz. And also, if my bow is angled too, actually this is set up pretty well, so it's not buzzing, but if my bow is angled too far over towards the C bout, that string is going to start vibrating into the fingerboard on the G string, and the same thing on the E string. So you might get some buzzing that is just a result of you not being close enough to the adjacent string. So they're technical reasons why you may be getting buzzes. There are setup reasons why you may be getting buzzes. And the bridge adjustment, just with the adjusters here, is probably your easiest course of action for trying to get that dialed in. If not, check out that resource for the bass shops. And then depends on where you live in terms of setup and how much that's going to fluctuate during the year. I live in San Francisco, California, where it's pretty much the same temperature year-round and humidity year-round. Now, I used to live in Chicago, Illinois. Not the same in January versus August. And the East Coast of the United States and most of Europe and so many other places in the world are going to have a lot of variability. Now, some of that you can address just by moving the bridge. And what you're going to notice is when it gets cold, everything pulls in a little bit and your strings go down. When it gets warm and more humid, everything's going to expand a little bit and your strings will go up. If you are in one of those climates, you have to crank the heat in the winter and turn on the AC in the summer, you will very likely need what is called a summer and winter sound post. That is something that you want to seek professional help with. And maybe a very, very tiny, small percentage of players will learn how to do that on their own. I certainly don't know how to do that on my own, and I don't think any of my friends know how to do it either. So probably you'll need to take your bass in to get that worked on. But if it's just a little bit of variability, or if you're just noticing from day to day or week to week that it's feeling a little low, it's feeling a little high, that's why these adjusters are here. I would recommend, and luthiers have done this for me, putting dots on your bridge adjusters just so that you make sure that you raise and lower both sides the same amount. Unlike electric bass or electric guitar where you can raise and lower each foot under the string of the bridge. Strings don't work like that, and double bass doesn't work like that. If you just raise the lower string side, you're going to shift your strings over, causing buzzes and possibly other problems. So we're trying to avoid buzzes and have a good setup and making sure that these stay the same in terms of their ratio. So I can raise this, I just have to make sure I raise the other side an equal amount. If you're not sure whether you're going to raise or lower your strings turning these things, and I've been playing bass for decades and I always forget, try one direction and listen to which way the pitch goes. If it goes up, you're going up. If it goes down, then just make your decision accordingly. If you are going to raise your bridge up a decent amount, it's probably a good idea to loosen the strings a little bit. Doesn't have to be crazy, maybe just a half step is fine. There are many other setup things that could contribute to buzzing or wolf tones or all those other things, but my advice is find a bass specialty shop near you. See them regularly, like taking your car in for some maintenance. They will be your best friend going forward. If you dug this topic, check out what we've got linked up.